Hello everyone, welcome to another session on introducing literature. In this session, I am going to wind up. This is my third lecture on A Hanging by George Orwell, the passage on that. In this session, I am trying to wind up with the questions that are actually given towards the end of that passage. Now we'll quickly look into the impressions that are incurred out of the passage. The first impression that we have received is the narrator of this particular passage, a hanging. He is not a victim, neither he has got the authority to stop the process of hanging. Rather, actually, you can say that he belongs to that magistrate alike group. Okay. Another important highlight you can say that we get from the passage is that there is a kind of wrongness in this particular process called hanging, and that is highlighted by the narrator. When he described that particular incident where the prisoner carefully avoided the puddle, and the next line he writes like this: wrongness in cutting a life short when it is in full tide. That is the idea that he has used there. So that is another output you can say that we get out of the passage. Another thing that we incur from the passage is that even after reading the entire passage, we are not very sure what was the crime committed by this prisoner who was in fact led to the gallows. Okay, the only thing that we know that he is a Hindu, and the usage is like he was a Hindu puny wisp of man. That is the idea that we actually get from the passage. Also, we are not very sure who are the persecutors. Okay, and it sounds like when we can compare it with the historical facts, we feel like the Britishers are there in the other side. And also, we can say, the passage is in fact not giving us an impression that the prisoner is a hardened criminal. There are many instances of irony in the passage. I have already noted that in my lecture too. Irony, as you know, they are the observations, or you can say the descriptions, okay, that actually convey a different kind of meaning, or you can say meant to convey an opposite meaning. As said in page number 98 of your textbook, the utterance and incident that evoke a response opposite to what actually we might expect, which broadly referred to in literature as irony. And so I have already discussed that in my previous lecture. Now I move on to the discussions on power. Okay, and before I move on discussions on power, I would like to discuss the two activities that are mentioned in page number 98 and 99 of your textbook. The first incident is about that puddle incident, and the second one probably we haven't discussed in detail so far, and that is where the prisoner, when he was brought out of the prison, that particular scene. With regard to that incident, the puddle incident, it goes like this: a bare brown back, okay, walking clumsily, and he stepped slightly aside to avoid a puddle on the path. The irony in his gesture has in fact been discussed by the writer, you can say. Throughout the passage, he gives us a kind of an impression that Indians are pretty careless, okay, but here you can see that is a kind of a contradiction when he avoids the puddle. Okay, he is walking clumsily, but he avoids the puddle. Okay, that's a kind of a contradiction. That actually signals at the idea that is in fact projected by the writers. They project their ideology, and the writers writers writing normally in favor of, you can say, their ideology or the power politics of the people. The second incident, as I've told you, is the incident where the prisoner is brought out of his cell by six tall men. Okay, so that we'll just go through the passage. One prisoner had been brought up out of his cell. Out of the many prisoners, there are so many prisoners, who are in fact awaiting the same similar kind of a fate. So this is not a single incident, or you can say a rare incident, but a very common one. And you can see that, that in the first passage, last line, first paragraph, last line, there were the condemned men due to be hanged within next week or two. And later you can see a Hindu, a puny wisp of man is brought out of his prison, and he was just a puny wisp of man, okay, and guarded by six tall Indian warders and getting him ready for the gallows. Puny man guarded by six tall men, and Indian prepared to the gallows by Indians themselves. The last line of the paragraph, it reads like this: with their hands always on him in a careful, caressing grip, as though all the while feeling him to make sure he was there. The man is inside prison, and inside the entire structure called prison, and the prisoner is already sure of his fate. Yet you can say how exactly he is guarded by the six tall Indians or Indian men. Okay, so here it can outrightly look at the very concept called power. Actually, here the this man who is in fact being led to the gallows is powerless and helpless, and thereby you can definitely make this general statement that power in fact works powerfully against the powerless. So the covert workings of power, covert, COVERT, that is reflected here. What exactly is covert workings of power? It means a form of power that is hidden, and therefore its effects are subtle but still effective. So it's a form of power, of course. First, it is hidden and its effects are subtle, okay, but it is effective. The agents controlling the power and their execution is not openly discussed or acknowledged by the public. Such types of workings of power are called covert workings of power. Okay, so one of the most important discussions on power is in fact shared by Michel Foucault, a name which I have referred often is Michel Foucault, in his book Madness and Civilization, where he argues that I quote, some section of population were classified as sick, criminal and mad, so that they could be placed under surveillance and observed by particular authorities. They are checked every now and then. They're under surveillance by authorities, authorities who actually feel that they might be challenged by these set of people. So for example, you can say writers, certain writers at certain points and at certain time in history, they are addressed as eccentric because they challenge the system. Okay, likewise, any person who moves out of the conventional created by the authorities or the people in the power are termed as mad or eccentric. So hope you have a general sense of the term. And these set of authorities, they constitute in fact by many. They determine the normalcy, they determine the normal and the abnormal, they determine the rules, they determine the truth, what is right, what is wrong, and all walks of knowledge, you can say. And the very surveillance by these authorities can be called as discourse, terrain of thought, system of knowledge, and even language. Through all these things, Their surveillance operate every time we move out of the normal, the acceptable of discourse, the acceptable of thought, the acceptable of knowledge, the acceptable of language. You are mad. Okay, so that allowed certain things and disallowed many other things. This concept of power Foucault goes in time with the concept of, you can say, ideology of Althusser and hegemony of Gramsci. So that's all for the day. I wind up my discussions on George Orwell, the passage by George Orwell, and we'll meet in another video. Till then, take care.